Welcome back to the Band Guide, where we use GarageBand to create professional sounding music. I'm your band guy, Colin, and today I want to finish up 2022 by answering your questions. So the other day I sent out an email to my email list and I just said, hey, what are you struggling with right now? Or what questions can I answer for you? And I got a lot of great questions back. Thank you for all of you who did respond to that. And next year I'm going to be responding to some of those questions in whole videos. I'll dedicate whole videos to answering them. But today I wanted to address as many of those questions as I could, as quickly as I could, because there was definitely some overlap, same questions from different people. So my bet is these are questions that you've had as well. So this video is going to be really helpful for you. But before we get into it, I want to give you something. If you've been struggling to get a professional sounding mix inside GarageBand, I've put together a 6-step checklist that just walks through the 6 steps that all professional mixes have and how you can do them inside GarageBand completely free. There's a link in the description below where you can pick it up, so be sure to grab it. It's completely free and it's really going to help you out. Let's go and get into the first question. Should I be listening back on multiple platforms like my phone and in my car? I've noticed my mix can sound great on my monitors or studio headphones, but still sounds bad on my phone. Now, this is a great question, and first and foremost, just yes, you should be listening on different systems because getting your mix to translate across different systems is important. We don't know what the end listener is going to be listening on, so it should sound good on the different systems. That said, you should prioritize mixing on your headphones and focusing on that, but what you have to start to pay attention to is how are the moves you're making when you're mixing on your headphones or studio monitors or however you're mixing translating, how is it affecting how it's going to sound out in the car? And one thing you can do that can help with that is listen to music on your studio headphones or monitors and out in your car or on your Sonos or Bluetooth or any of those speakers and get familiar with how they sound different in the different places. That's going to help you make decisions. The other reality with this, unfortunately, is that it's just going to take some time. The more mixes you do, the more comfortable and quicker you'll get at making mixes that translate across the different systems. The last thing that I want to say about this is that your phone and a lot of speakers, but your phone's a great example of it, computer speakers as well, they're not very good speakers. So it is as good as it's ever been, but it still isn't ever going to sound as good as great studio monitors or great headphones. And so understanding that is really helpful. And one thing that I've noticed has really helped me getting a mix to translate and sound better on some of these different systems that just don't reproduce sound quite as well is something that I call the quiet mix check. So as you are finishing the mixing process, just listen to your mix super, super quietly. So turn down your interface, your headphone monitors, whatever it is, so that you're listening to your mix really, really quietly. And pay attention to how your mix changes as it gets to a quieter volume. It's going to change. You're going to lose some low end. You're going to lose some high end. You're going to start to hear things a little bit differently. But your mix shouldn't completely fall apart, right? For example, if you notice that your kick drum or your snare drum or your vocal just completely disappears as you turn the signal way down, then that's probably a pretty good indicator that you might need to tweak or spend a little bit more time trying to figure out how to bring out that element in your mix, right? So the quiet mix check has really, really helped me with this. Definitely try it out and let me know in the comments below if that helps you out as well. But let's go move on to question number 2, which is, can I use sidechain compression in GarageBand? This is a short answer, and that is no. But I'll give you a slightly longer answer as well. So in short, sidechain compression is where you have one track that has a compressor on it, and you are sending a signal from another track to that compressor. So if you have a bass guitar and a kick drum, you would send a signal from the kick drum to the compressor of the bass guitar so that it will turn down the bass guitar every time that kick drum hits, right? You can see how that would be helpful, right? Every time the kick hits, the bass gets turned down just a little bit, you're going to hear that kick drum a little bit better. That's really, really helpful. But the reality is it's not necessary most of the time. And this is something that I think the internet makes it seem like every song you've ever heard is using sidechain compression all over the place. It's just not. It's just not. Most engineers that I know professionally or that I've just studied from, they don't really use sidechain compression nearly as much as people think. They use it occasionally to solve some very specific problems, but not very often. So if you're just starting out, I wouldn't worry about sidechain compression at all. I used to think about it all the time. I spent all this time trying to figure it out and try to use it, and it just never seemed to be helping me all that much, and it turns out it just isn't necessary a lot of the time. Fundamental mixing, like just normal compression and normal EQ and just getting your volumes right, is way, way more helpful. The only exception I'll give to this is if you're working on like EDM or any sort of electronic music that is trying to use sidechain compression to create a specific effect. Like if you're trying to create a pumping like boom, boom, that's like a sidechain compression thing. If you're doing that, then you might need to have sidechain compression, in which case getting Logic would be really helpful. Logic does allow you to do it, but there's no way to do it in GarageBand. But again, sidechain compression for most people on most things, not necessary. I wouldn't worry about it. So if you don't need it, don't worry about it. Okay, let's move on to question number 3. My MV Meter 2 is not showing the presets. I get this question all the time, and there's actually 3 ways to see the presets, to pull up the presets, because I know some computers, for some reason, don't show them to you. I don't know why. But let's look in GarageBand. I'll show you how you can see those presets in 3 different ways. So when you first pull up MV Meter 2, it's going to default to the VU setting. To change this, the first place you can change it is up here under the presets, factory presets, and then we can change it there, but you might not be seeing that. The second place is these 3 lines right here. We can click that and it will bring up factory defaults here. If you're still not seeing it there for some reason, then down here under where it says VU, you can actually just click on the word and you can change the preset there. Okay, question number 4. I'm struggling with my mixes being too quiet after bouncing the project out of GarageBand. Okay, very, very common. This is because mixing and recording is not where you're making your music loud. That is mastering. That is a whole separate process. But if you just want to quickly make your song loud, you can do that just by throwing a limiter on your master track. I've talked about a link to a video above here where I've explained that. So just quickly throwing a limiter on can bring your volume up drastically and get it to a safe volume without any distortion or anything like that, getting it closer to those other songs. And then when you finish mixing your song, you've checked on other systems, then mastering it is your last step. And I've done a video that I'll link above here. Okay, question number 5. What are your recommendations for mastering? This is a great question. And I would say that first and foremost, I would check out that video I just linked above. But when it comes to mastering, I really think there's 2 main things that you should be thinking about. First and foremost, you should treat it as a separate process from the mixing process. This is a whole separate process. We are trying to safely bring up our volume of our song. So with that, I would encourage you to create a whole new session, create a mastering session. I've done a video on this, I'll link to above here. This is really, really helpful to help you get the best final product. Create a mastering session, recommendation number 1. Recommendation number 2 is to not worry so much about loudness levels, because there is a wide variation of loudness levels in commercially released music as well. So this is definitely something that over the years people have been more and more consumed with, is trying to get it as loud as possible, to get it as loud as the pros. But even the pros don't necessarily agree on what exactly the loudest level should be. So don't worry too much about it. Make sure that it sounds good, that it feels right. And if you do those 2 things, then you can't lose, because you did the best job that you could do at the time and it still felt right to you. And if it feels right to you, then it is right. There's no right or wrong at the end of the day. And then the third thing I'll say, a little bonus, is that negative 14 LUFS a few years ago really felt like, oh, this is going to be game changing. This is going to be the standard. This is going to be what everybody masters to. And it's played out that that's not as much the truth and not as much the case. So people are still aiming for closer to -9, -8 LUFS as their loudness meter measure. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it right now, but just something to keep in mind, which actually leads me into the next question, I think, which is, what can I do when mastering my song to make it much louder while still retaining the quality without any distortion? Okay, so this is where applying the right principles is helpful. You need to be mixing, getting all your dynamics right in the mixing stage. You need to get your tonal balance right. That's really important in the mixing stage. And then when it comes time to master, I highly recommend the 2 limiter approach. This is where you use 2 limiters instead of just 1, and you basically share the load between those 2. It is more transparent and allows you to get a little extra volume. It's not game changing. You can't make it way louder with that, but you can get a little extra volume. The other thing is actually using something called a clipper. So I've done a video on that. I'll link to that above here. There is not one built into GarageBand, and there are some free ones. I do talk about that in that video, but I really like this one that's fairly affordable by Sir Audio, I think is their name, and it's just great. It's called Standard Clip, and it basically allows you to clip off the top of the hit so that your limiter isn't pushing it down, which just makes it a less pumping sounding master. It's just a little bit more natural sounding. So I really like that. It's helped me get a much, much louder master that doesn't have audible distortion or pumping, which I think we can all agree those are bad things. We don't necessarily want that unless you want that. So maybe don't do it if you want that. But if you want less pumping and no distortion added to your mix in the mastering stage, clipping can really help. Technically, it is adding distortion, but not that you'll hear it. So I think you'll like it. Check it out. Definitely check out that video and try the 2 limiter approach as well. Okay, the next question I have is about vocals. What is your preferred panning for backing vocals, specifically if there are 3 or 4 different voices or harmonies? Okay, this is a great question. So panning, I have a few different approaches when it comes to panning vocals. My number one approach is in a, let's just say the big chorus, wherever you have the most vocals. This could be in a verse, but wherever you have the most vocals, I will typically have my main lead vocal, and then I'll have a double of that lead vocal, and they're both going to be panned center. And then I'll have a left and a right that are panned either 50-50, so not 100% off to the left and right, or 100%, as far as I can pan them off to the left and the right. And that just gives you a really wide sound. If I tuck them in a little bit, it gives you a little less width, but it gives you a little bit more of a cohesive sound and just reinforces kind of the center sound of that vocal while giving it a little bit of width. So you can play around with that. Just make sure that feels balanced, whatever you do. And then when it comes to harmonies, that's where I'll get a little bit more experimental. So my most common approach, if I'm doing harmonies, is to do a low harmony in the center and then do maybe a third or a fifth off on one side and then a third or a fifth in the other side, or an octave above. Like I might pan it so that there's different harmonies at different points. Or if I just need a big choral effect, big sound of just like harmonies that blend together, I'm not trying to separate them where it's noticeable, then I will do like a low octave in the middle, maybe a low octave in each side, and I might do a third and a fifth in each side, and I might do an octave in each side. So it's a lot more vocals, but it's going to give you a big kind of just full vocal sound. I like that approach too. No right or wrong, just trust your ears and make sure that your balance isn't getting too far off where it starts to feel like your mix is leaning one way or another. It's okay if you have a harmony, like sometimes I'll pan off a harmony where it's a lead vocal and then there'll just be one harmony off in the left ear. That'd be right ear, I guess, for you because of the camera, but off in the right ear, and just like pulls the listener for a second, but then, you know, your attention is back on the lead vocal after that. So you can play around with it being off kilter, like pulling your ear one side or the other, but you don't want big swaths of time where you're just kind of like, why do I feel like the mix is leaning off to this side? So pay attention to balance the whole time as you're setting those pan positions. Okay, and finally, on double tracking vocals, what advice would you offer? This is great. This is really, I think, something that a lot of people feel like they can't get really, really close doubles. And that's because most doubles that you hear that are really, really close are using some amount of editing and or vocal tuning to get them to be really tight. So our vocals, I will usually use a vocal tuning software like Melodyne, or I love the Waves Tune to tune them, and or shift the timing just a little bit to really get them lined up with each other, and or flex time and just chopping and sliding little bits around so that the timing is really lined up. So getting your tuning so that everything is really in tune with each other, and then get your timing where everything is really in time with each other. That makes it where those vocals, instead of sounding like 3 or 4 or 5 vocals, just sound like one huge vocal. And if you really, really, really listen, you can often tell that there's multiple vocals there, but generally speaking, just the average listener is just going to experience it as one vocal that's really, really big. So that little bit of tuning, that little bit of editing to tighten it up can make a huge difference. I've done a video on vocal editing, I'll link above here. I've also done a video on natural vocal tuning. They'll link above here if I still have links left. I can only link 5 videos in one video, so hopefully I do. I hope that is helpful. It is definitely something that takes a little bit of practice and you'll get better with over time as you continue to record and edit your vocal doubles. Oh, and one final note is you can also just cut T's and S's on doubles. You got to play around with it, but sometimes I just cut them out and that sounds better than having like my T in my center and then the T off in the left ear kind of flamming, right? So it's like t-t-t-t. It's really hard to get those perfectly lined up, so sometimes I just cut them. It's very, very natural, and believe it or not, you would never notice it in the actual song. So always keep it in mind in the context of the song, and don't get too obsessed if it sounds perfect when you're listening to it in solo. It might sound really weird in solo and totally perfect and natural in the context of the song. Okay, I hope this was helpful. This is my last video of 2022. This year is crazy. We're about to have our first baby in early next year, so the beginning of next year is probably going to be pretty crazy for me too. I really appreciate your patience, your support for me and this channel. This is a crazy time for me, and I'm really nervous, excited, all of the above, but doing it with this community and the people on this channel and on my email list and in my courses, it's changed my life, and it's absolutely just an honor that I get to share some of my time and your time with you every day, every week, whenever it is that you're watching my videos. This is my favorite thing I've ever done in my life. So it means the world to me. I really, really appreciate having you here on this channel. As I said, we're having our first kid in early next year, so I already know I'm taking next week off. My hope is to be back and not miss any more weeks in the new year. I'm going to try to plan ahead and be ahead on my videos so that I'm not missing any once the baby comes. But you know how it is having a kid. That baby could come any day now. We're at that point in this, but they're supposed to come early February. So fingers crossed, everything's good, everything's well. But if you don't hear from me for a week, I appreciate your patience in advance and your understanding. And thanks so much for everything on this channel. If you don't already have it, grab my 6-step checklist to a pro mix and GarageBand. It's completely free from link in the description below. It's really going to help you out. It's literally helped out thousands of people already. I've heard before and afters of their mixes. It's not a complex checklist. It's not walking through everything you need to know, but it gives you the bare bones so that you have a system that you can follow. It's the same system I teach inside my courses, just a little bit more stripped back to get you started with it. So I really hope this is helpful. And if you're watching this before Christmas, Merry Christmas to you. Happy holidays, whatever holidays it is you're celebrating. Happy New Year to you if I don't see you before the new year, and I'll see you in 2023.
One thing at a time.